Hello. So, are you having a good day so far? There's been a lot of good speakers. Whose brain is hurting right now? A little tired. We get a lot of input. Well, I've got good news for you. This is not a technical presentation. This is more about working with people. What I want to share with you is what's worked for me. So this is not theory. This is the lessons that I've learned working with IT groups, primarily in the United States, Australia, and Europe. So let's just jump right in. So what we're going to talk about is lean culture. Let's try to define that and talk about why we have barriers for change. And if anybody attended the GE session, they were talking about a change management model. I don't have a model. I just have some principles that I follow. Lessons learned, the power of value stream mapping. How many people do value stream mapping here? Just about everyone? So I have a little twist to value stream mapping that I like to use in IT value stream mapping that I hope will help you. And then, very important, what works and what doesn't work. So I think there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of misunderstandings about lean IT, and I want to share that. And then a few reflections. Last night, after a few glasses of wine, I said, oh, I need some reflections. So I've got my reflections right here. So I don't know if they're going to be any good, but it was good wine. So we'll see. And then if we have time, we'll have some questions. So everything that I'm talking about today, I owe to someone else. So I've been very, very lucky to work with some amazing companies, and they've allowed me to learn by doing and to learn by trying and experimenting. So I don't take credit for any of this. This is really working with other companies and learning together. That's really what Lean is about, learning and sharing. So I just am indebted to all these organizations. So what is culture? Okay, how many people, we've all heard of culture, right? So what is culture? What is culture? Well, if you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers. Everybody's got a slightly different version. What I like to say is culture is the shared agreements that we have in our company, in our organization. Agreements for what? Well, I would suggest there's two key agreements. What we will notice and what we will not notice. So what we will notice is, did you make the numbers this month? Did you get your budget report in? Did you turn in your timesheet? What we won't notice is you made a commitment at the team meeting and didn't follow through, but we'll just let it slide because I know you're busy and maybe you'll get to it. You jumped to a solution without applying PDCA. I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to embarrass you. So culture is really the standard that we all hold each other towards. So what does that picture have to do with culture? You know what that's a picture of? It's hard to see. That's a campfire with the tribe sitting around the campfire. So who's familiar with tribal knowledge? Tribal knowledge is part of culture. It's all the things that we understand that are documented nowhere. So think of your organization. How much of your work that you do has no documentation, no formal documentation? It's information that is stored in people's heads. No standard work. It's the culture that we have. Do we have a culture that it's okay that one person has all the knowledge and the rest of us just go to him and say, how do I do it? Or do we have a culture of transparency, that we need to have information that's shared, that we create standards and we build continuously and make improvement? So this is what culture is, in my opinion. So what is lean culture? I'm sure there's books written on this. All I can do is share what I've seen that works in the organizations I've been in that really are improving, have used lean to integrate it with their being. They are being lean. They're not trying to do lean. This is what I've seen. First of all, everybody in the organization realizes that business is about experiments. Everything is done as an experiment. There's no jumping to solutions. It's, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? What are the potential countermeasures? After I grasp the situation and understand, or think I understand, what the potential causes are, not the root cause, the potential cause, how can I do an analysis that can lead me to an experiment to prove whether or not I understand the process? So first of all, I see lots of experimentation. Number two, perhaps the most important, no fear. So fear of what? What would people be afraid of? Is there fear in organizations? No fear? Yeah, losing their job, or what I would say is fear of making a mistake. Fear of making a mistake. So in meetings, this is what I see. There's a problem. We all run into the room, and what do? We start brainstorming. You brainstorm? And we write ideas down on the whiteboard, many, many, many ideas. And then, how do we select the solution? How do we select the next step? Do we go out and grasp the situation? Do we go to Gemba? Do we talk to the customer? Do we do a fishbone diagram? Usually not. You know what we normally do? The person in the room with the most rank says, I think number 3 looks really good. And then what does the rest of the group do? We say, that's a great idea. I was going to say that too. I love option number 3. So we've all been there. We've all done this. It's because people are frightened. We're afraid. We don't want to look stupid. We don't want to challenge our boss. We don't even want to challenge our coworker. In the organizations that seem to really be getting this, IT organizations as well as organizations outside of IT, there is no fear because it's okay to experiment. It's not trial and error when we do an experiment. It's trial and discovery. We try something and we discover whether or not the countermeasure is effective. If it isn't, we repeat the PDCA cycle. Number 3, we hold everyone to a higher standard. So what I've seen is it's completely fine to turn in the meeting to your manager, to your boss, and say, it feels like we're jumping to a conclusion here. Are we making assumptions or are we managing on fact? Are we honoring the process? That's my favorite question. Are we honoring the process? So often we don't hold each other to a higher standard. We say, I'm not going to take the risk and use my political capital to call somebody out, or say, I don't think we're honoring the process today. I think we're jumping to conclusions. And last of all, something I call the discipline paradox. So do we need discipline to be lean thinkers? What do you think? Does it require disciplined thinking to think? Absolutely. Okay, is it easy to be disciplined? No. How many people have gone on a diet? How's that working for you? It's hard to be disciplined. It's very hard. So the discipline paradox is you don't get better at thinking or lean thinking by doing more thinking. You don't. We saw this earlier. John Shook wrote this up years ago when he wrote about NUMMI, when he talked about it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting. So what does that mean? It means that for me to change my thinking, I want to do a little reading, get a little education. That's nothing wrong with that. There's some great books out there. But what are the actions I have to take to change? What are the actions that will actually change my thinking? Not what's the thinking that will change my thinking. So what I find is the actions that will change your thinking, the number one thing you can do is carry an A3 with you, a blank A3. You only get good with an A3 if you use an A3. And I see a lot of people, the only time they do an A3 is when? When they do a Kaizen event. And why do they do the A3 for the Kaizen event? Because it's the law, right? I got to do it. So I fill out the A3, and then what do we do with the A3? Or we put it on the wall. So I was at a company recently, they had beautiful A3s, so I couldn't help but look at the date. It was over 2 years old, an A3 up there. It was beautiful, very nice color, but they weren't thinking. So an A3 is a great tool. So discipline requires action, not more thinking. So I call this a lean culture. So barriers to change. Barriers to change. So we've heard a lot about change. This is just some of the barriers that I've encountered. Really, I believe it comes down to focus. What we're focusing on is what creates the barriers. So what's the number one thing companies tend to focus on when they talk about lean? I would suggest it's tools. I just mentioned the A3. I said you ought to carry it around. You ought to be doing an A3 at least once a week. I believe you really should. Do personal A3s. Do an A3 about spending quality time with your wife. Do an A3 about cleaning out your garage. Just use the tool and you'll start to think using the PDCA cycle through acting with an A3. So one focus that gets in the way is focusing too much on tools. So how many people fell in love with value stream mapping? We all did. I went to one company. They said, would you show us value stream mapping? I did. They said, thank you. Go away. I did. They called back in 3 months, and they said, come back. I came back. They had a room, and it was covered in value stream maps. I mean, big room. I'd never seen so many value stream maps, and every value stream map was put into Visio. You know Visio? So you know how long that takes to take a value stream map and put it in Visio? So they had all these value stream maps. They said, pretty impressive, huh? And I said, wow, I've never seen so many value stream maps. Can you tell me about the improvement activities that these value stream maps help foster? They said, what are you talking about? They fell in love with mapping. So a tools focus gets in the way. Another focus is focusing on results. This is counterintuitive because anybody with a business degree, we all were taught to focus on results. Focusing on results and not being process focused is a mistake, because we're just running after the carrot, but we're not looking at the means to get the carrot, which is process. I like to say you ought to consider a dual focus on two things. If you go to your boss and say, we don't need to focus on results, he will say, get out of here, and you're never going to another lean conference again. So you can't do that. Instead, you say we have a dual focus. We need to focus on results with ideal behavior. Ideal behavior. So what is ideal behavior? So I love to ask managers, what does ideal behavior look like? If your people were working in an ideal way, what would that look like? And you know what they say? I can't describe it. I don't know for sure. So I say, tell me, what does ideal behavior not look like? Then they've got a million examples. So we know what it doesn't look like, but we have a hard time describing what it does. So if our leadership, if our management can't describe ideal behavior, how can we expect our associates to behave in an ideal fashion? It makes no sense. So focus is a barrier. Another barrier that I see is isolating lean in silos. So are you doing lean? Yes, we're doing lean. Where? We're doing it in this team, in this department, in this area. Anywhere else? Oh yeah, that team over there is doing it. Anywhere else? Yes, across the street we've got another Kaizen team. So this is how a lot of companies get started, but I don't see many of the companies move on to value streams. So we're not looking at the horizontal flow of value, we're looking at the vertical silo and just trying to make that more efficient. In my opinion, that's a barrier. That doesn't really help anything. So these are self-inflicted wounds because I believe we're focusing on the wrong thing. So a few lessons learned. First of all, when I sit down with leadership, I like to say, right now you should make a go, no-go decision on lean. Don't do lean halfway. So what is lean halfway? Lean is, well, we're going to do a couple of projects and we'll wait and see. If it's promising, if we have great results, then we're going to adopt lean. I say no. I suggest you talk to some other companies that have done lean, but make a decision. Either do it or don't do it. Because I think it's disrespectful for the people. They don't know if it's real, if it's a commitment or not. Reinvesting. This is something that I see a lot of companies not doing. So reinvesting means when you have a Kaizen project and you have a time savings, you must reinvest the win in more lean. I would say in more lean. If you're way behind, you have a bad backlog, you're in trouble, fine. Invest part of it in daily work and part of it in lean. But the common mistake I see is let's say we save 1 hour a week in a 20-person department. So we save 20 hours, and we can demonstrate we have saved 20 hours a week. Where do you think that time goes? It just gets absorbed. So if we don't reinvest, if we don't say, look, I've got 20 hours, what are we going to do with it? It's like money to spend. But if I don't invest it, what happens to my money? I spend it on wine. It goes, who knows where it goes? It's gone, right? So you must reinvest the gains. And as you do, you make up more time. Then you can start to do the lean work that we're talking about. Another one is the moment of truth. This happens in every company. The moment of truth is, yes, we're doing lean. It's a go. We're serious about this. We're not going to stop. Yes, we're reinvesting the gains, and we're doing more Kaizen work, and we're empowering the people, and we're training them, and we're doing everything right. Then the moment of truth happens. We lose a key client. The market dips. There is a weather storm like we just had in New York, and it affects the economy in a big way. When these big bumps in the road hit, what does leadership do with lean? What typically do you see? What have you seen? Yeah, what I see often is, we're going to put lean on hold. We're going to put lean on hold, and for 6 months, we're going to buckle down. We're going to hunker down. That's the term they use in the States. I don't even know what it means. But hunker down, I think it means to huddle like that. So we're going to hunker down, wait 6 months, and then we'll come back and do lean. I say that's very risky. It sends the wrong message. People say, oh, this is another flavor of the month. It's not real. You said it was real. You said you were committed. You said we were going to really do this, and now we're not going to do it. So I always say, expect your moment of truth and be prepared to stay the course. And then failing forward. So failing forward, when we have failures, or what we call failures, first of all, we need to get rid of the word failure. I like the word discovery. So if we have a Kaizen, we make a change, we are hoping for some great results, breakthrough results, and those don't occur. If we say it's a failure, it demotivates everyone. We have to say, how do we use this as a springboard to fail forward, to keep moving forward? That ties back to the fear. So I said to my wife, look, things aren't a failure, they're a discovery. And then about a week later, I was talking to my wife, and I said, I forget what I was complaining about, but I said, you did this, and I think you did it the wrong way. And she turned to me and she said, that's a discovery. So don't share any of this material with your spouse. So the power of value stream mapping. Okay, anyone that's done value stream mapping knows how powerful this can be. First of all, I love the fact that it creates a shared understanding and context of everybody's contribution in a true value stream, delivering value to the customer, external customer. Now, we can appreciate the internal customers within the value stream, but if we're not flowing all the way to the external customer, I suggest that perhaps we need to zoom out and look further. But it also creates context in the sense that I've done many value streams where people have said, I've worked here for 10 years and I had no idea that my job impacted your job. Or that when I take a shortcut, it causes you more work. Or that we're doing a review 3 times in this process, and I don't think any review is required. So we have lots of non-value-added work. It also creates focus. So I see a lot of well-intended companies out there trying to apply lean, but there's no focus. So in other words, if you look around, if you do a Gemba walk, if you look at what's on the walls, they're doing a lot of lean activity. But if you ask them, can you tie your lean improvement work that you're doing right now to a value stream or to a customer problem that you're trying to solve? The answer is often not really, kind of, sort of. So I made this mistake years ago. I used to have teams select their own Kaizen events. So what's wrong with that? I think it's a great way to start because they're interested. But if you keep letting teams select their own Kaizen events, how are those aligned with the corporate goals or with customer needs? Often I find they're not. So it's not the team's fault. I think we need to do a better job in terms of leadership. So when I'm doing a value stream map, I like to say to teams, and maybe this is not complete, this is just my understanding and my opinion. I like to say to teams that we're really just looking for a few things in the value stream map. Number one, where do we have quality at the source? Where, when we do the work, it is perfect. It's never coming back for any rework. It's complete. It's accurate. It's pristine. Do we have that anywhere? Number one. Number two, where do we have delays? Where do we have bottlenecks? Where do we not have flow? Number three, what are the steps that obviously are non-value added? And the fourth one I like to ask is, which of the steps in the value stream have the greatest degree of variation in how we do the work? Those 4 things create focus because the team starts to look and they all reach consensus and they say, my God, early in the value stream, we've got a step here that is high variation, questionable value add, and it's mucking up the whole value stream as we go. So it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. So this is the one piece that I like to do when I'm value stream mapping is to look more closely at information flow. So we're very familiar with our process box, and we're looking at process time, lead time, quality, perhaps there's setup time in here, other data dimensions. But what I like to do is add these 2 boxes. What we're looking at is information in and information out for that particular activity box in the value stream. You can do this in a process map too if you're at that level. So what we're looking for here, we talked about quality at the source. What percentage of the information that comes in is 100% complete and accurate? I've never seen it 100% complete and accurate. Also, what are the sources? Is this coming from 1 database, 2 databases, 4 applications, carrier pigeon? I mean, how are we getting this information? And then, who owns this information? Often, the teams cannot answer these questions. Is that a problem? If we don't know where the information's coming from, is that a problem? It's a huge problem. So this opens up a great discussion. The other thing I like to ask, and I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I've been debating it with somebody from Australia over the internet for the last few months, and that is, does all information in need to touch the customer? In other words, is everything I'm delivering here, does it need to go out the value stream and touch the customer? Or is it adding value if it's simply enabling some kind of transformation of product or service? It's an interesting discussion. So one last thing on this slide, and that is we allow the user, not the supplier, to define how the data needs to be transformed to become information, to define what it means for the data to be timely and accurate, to define what form it should come in, what medium it should be, and to define how information will enable their value-added process. Often what I see is, guess who's defining these things? IT. Or no one. It's one of the two. So who should be defining these things? I would think the customer, the internal customer or the external customer. Should they define them and send an email to IT? Will that work? No. We want IT in the room having a dialogue with the business. This is also something that's missing. We have IT isolated over here, and we have the business over here. And then we complain and we criticize IT for not being integrated. Well, it's because we don't have everybody in the room. So what works? Okay, what works if you're just getting started is what I like to call clean up your own backyard. So instead of taking the IT department and saying, we're doing lean IT, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take you in the IT department and we're going to throw you into the business. And you're going to do a lean IT project with the business. I've done it before. I don't like the approach. Often because the rest of the business is already doing lean. And IT hasn't done any lean yet. So think about IT professionals. Do they like to be thrown in the deep end of the pool and not know what's going on? No, they kick and scream. They're uncomfortable with it. So what I prefer to do is give them an experience or two of the PDCA cycle and of a Kaizen event, and we do it in their own backyard. So we pick a process that is predominantly IT-centric. So I just did one recently with a company, and they were struggling with their problem management process. Now, that impacts the entire company, but they really own it. They could do that Kaizen and focus on the piece that they owned in their process. Another one is the onboarding process. Again, that touches facilities, that touches HR, but IT has a big piece of that. And that one's a very good one to get started with. Help desk is another good one. Those are all projects that you can start with. Internal coaches. This, I believe, is so important. Never start a lean Kaizen without identifying internal coaches. What's an internal coach? These will be people that if they work out, they will be the coaches when the consultant leaves. So many people start with a consultant, that's how I make my living. That's fine. But if you're working with a consultant and you're not training internal coaches, it's a big mistake. It's not, get another consultant. Because what's going to happen is the consultant will leave, and then you're going to say, now what do I do? So, very important. Internal coaches. Another one, systems. So in IT, when we say systems, what do we think of? network systems, accounting systems, security systems, infrastructure systems, governance systems. We've got more systems than you can shake a stick at. But I'm not talking about those kind of systems. I'm talking about work systems. Work systems are what drive behavior. Do we have a reward system at work? Reward system? Compensation system? Recognition system? Sure. These systems drive behavior. There are many other systems that drive behavior. What we should be doing is asking ourselves, what behavior do we see? What systems are driving that behavior? And then act accordingly. So when I work with a company, I like to focus on 4 key systems. I'll tell you the first 2. If you want the other 2, you have to send me an email so I get to know you. The first two, problem-solving system. Does your company have a problem-solving system? I go into companies and guess what they have? Everybody solves problems differently. People that have been on lean, what do? PDCA. What about the Six Sigma people? DMAIC. What about engineering? 8D. Have you heard of 8D? 8D is another one. Google it. And then other people, they're brainstorming. So nobody's on the same page for problem solving. So that's number 1. Number 2, you should have an internal coaching system. It's an actual system to build internal capability. If those aren't in place, how can we grow? We don't have standard work around problem solving? That doesn't even make any sense. Another important one, be humble. So this one I see is kind of rare. It's in the best companies, but it's missing in the worst companies. And what I mean by be humble is not to be shy and timid and to whisper. That's not what we're talking about here. Being humble is when leadership says, I don't have all the answers. Things are too complex. I need the hearts and minds of the associates. However, leadership says, follow me, let's do this together. Leadership also says, I'm comfortable not having all the answers. So I work with a lot of leaders, and they've spent 30 years having all the answers. How do you think this goes over when you talk about being humble? They don't like it. Why? It's fear. It threatens their persona, their ego. But what I find in the best companies, there's a humility. So when you walk in and you see, wow, you really have reorganized around value streams. Everybody is doing Kaizen. I see real A3 thinking going on here. And I compliment them. What's the first thing that they say? I've heard it in many companies. What's that? Yes, they say we could be better. We've just gotten started. We've been doing this for 10 or 15 or 20 years, but we wish we would have started 30 years earlier. We have so far to go. So it's like a world-class athlete, and you go, wow, that's incredible. You can run a 4-minute mile. And the world-class athlete says, yes, but I really need to run a 3-minute and 50-second mile. So it's a totally different, and that keeps you humble, realizing that there's more to go. So what doesn't work, and what will get you the blue screen of death in your organization, is starting with promises. I see this a lot. So promises are, we're going to do lean IT, and you guys are going to work 40 hours a week. We're going to have work-life balance. We're going to have beer and cake on Friday. There's going to be a big bonus. All our customers will love us. The business will work with us, and you will not want to leave. You're going to love it here. So we overpromise and underdeliver. So I prefer to keep the promises at a minimum. Don't overdo it. So I've seen we oversell lean. We say, it's going to do all these things. We'll get rid of the backlog. We're not going to work the overtime. The stress is going to go away, and you're going to be empowered. You're going to feel better about yourself. Don't go there. It's setting too high of an expectation. Now, this one you might shoot me for, but this is just my opinion, so I'm going to say it. Certifications. Okay, I'm not saying don't get certified. I have many certifications too. But certifications alone are poison. I've gone into organizations and they say, we are all ITIL certified. I say, wow, that's really great. So can you tell me how you're doing? Are you doing any continuous improvement? Well, no, I told you we're all ITIL certified. I'm not kidding. It's like calling up the help desk and saying, I can't get on my machine. I've got mission critical work to do. And they say, hey, cool down. We're all certified. Everything's okay. It's not okay. So certifications are just certifications. And I've seen companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros getting people certified just for certification's sake. And I'd say beware of that. Sideshow. A sideshow is, well, we're going to do lean kind of sort of on the side. So we have your real job, and then there's lean projects. That's not a good way to go, because people will say, these two people down here keep going like that. So, do you work? They're saying, do you work at my company? So the sideshow is when we say, well, we're going to just dabble in lean a little bit. When we have some time, we'll do a little Kaizen. It's not going to be 3 or 5 intense days. It's going to be 2 hours a week, or 1 hour a week, or every other week. That just doesn't get it done. And then a tools focused. I mentioned this earlier, but when we fall in love with tools, we make a big mistake. So what I would suggest, I've been there. There's a recovery program if you're addicted to tools, and I've gone through it, and you can break the habit. So what you want to do is, first of all, start thinking about systems. So systems, I define a system as a collection of tools to achieve a specific objective. So ask yourself, if I take my lean toolbox or my Six Sigma toolbox, which tools do I pull out of the toolbox to create a system? And most importantly, what is the objective of the system? So we talked about a problem-solving system. What's the objective of a problem-solving system? It's not a trick question. What is it? To solve problems. So pick the tools. Don't give people 30 tools. Pick the 3 or 4 or 5 tools that you need, put them together, and ask yourself, what do we mean by teach people to solve problems? What does that mean in my organization? I want consistency. I want transparency. I want ideal sharing. What else do I want? I want to become a learning organization. I want to learn from solving my problems. I want to, as Dan said, I want to leave the team in a more capable state than when I found the team. That's how I build a system. That's the focus, and that's the recovery plan to get you off of tools. So, reflection. Time for my glass of wine. So, number 1 reflection. Get comfortable with uncertainty. This is a tough one for IT. Does IT work with uncertainty? We don't like it. We don't like it. We like on and off. Yeah, 0, 1, 0, 1. The bit is on or off. Don't mess with me, right? So, but we have to get comfortable with uncertainty. Why? Because that's the universe we live in. We don't have solutions. We have hunches. And we need a scientific method to see whether or not our hunch is provable in an experiment. If it is, we will make it the new standard. If it isn't, we will repeat the PDCA cycle. Number 2, operational excellence, which is another term for lean. Some people are using that. In the States, lean has a funny background. A lot of people said, we tried lean, and it didn't work for us. So I come in and I say, yes, but have you tried operational excellence? And they say, no, what's that? So I've never had a company say, we don't want any operational excellence. But they will say, we don't want any lean. So go with operational excellence if it works in your company. So operational excellence is personal excellence. Let me say that again because I really believe it. Operational excellence is personal excellence. So we're asking people to be the best they can be at a very real level. This is not a project-based dabble in a few tools and look clever at some meeting. This is real. This is saying, I need to be a much more effective person. This works at home, this works at school, this works at church, this works wherever you go. These tools are really about raising your consciousness. They're about being aware as a human being. So operational excellence is personal excellence. Everyone has two aspects to their job. We've all heard do the work, but the second aspect is improve how you do your work. So if you're a great star at work, but you're not improving your work, I would suggest you're only doing half your job. And then lean transformation is about transforming people. It's not about transforming the organization. It's about transforming people. It's not about technical tools. Well, that was it for my reflections. So thank you.